I believe it was I don't know, it was either the Surgeon General or the CDC. And I think last year they had put out a document that said that we are now in a new pandemic, the pandemic of loneliness.
Correct.
And how loneliness and depression are at its highest it's ever been. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, in fact, that was some some of my preparation notes when we were talking about the topic of the area, loneliness. It sure is. It's an epidemic. The U.S. Surgeon General's report did come out in the spring, and basically some of the things they were saying was the dangers of loneliness, and what they were finding in the research is it is associated with a greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting statistics they put out was in their research was being lonely is more deadly or is as bad for people's health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's like, what?
That's
loneliness.
Well, don't go smoking,
yes.
right?
Yeah, don't. And if you need help quitting, call me. Because it's one of the best things you can do.
But
in that
just
sense.
to hear that, right? Mm-hmm. Like it kills.
Yes.
Where do you think all that's coming from?
A couple of things. Good you asked that question because that's a topic I was bringing out, right? And I think it has to do with just like I said, this relationship and belonging. Mm-hmm. And tying it back to our Catholic faith. Mm-hmm. I was this weekend we spent time talking about the Imago Dei, right? How are we made? We're made in the image and likeness of God, and with that in itself, it's about relationships. Yeah, because it's God, but three manifestations, right? So it's Father, Son, if you follow Bishop Barron's podcast, right? The love expressed between Father and Son is the Holy Spirit. Yep. But it's already a relationship. So if we are made in that image and likeness, then inherently we are social beings. We need to be in a relationship. But over the past decade or two, there's been a couple factors, I think. One is, there's just been a declining attendance at church in general. Mm-hmm. We were just talking about podcasts from before and how that was happening. And so that moral structure, that ethical structure, just the community network is gone. Our families, we talked about, just families and commitment. And what is the divorce rate these days? 50%. Yeah. 1 out of 2 marriages tend to dissolve. And if you've got kids, again, where's the connection there? So that's another degradation in terms of the social network. Cell phones, social media, right? There's no interaction there outside of looking at your screen time. And so that ability to connect with another person is lost. You can connect virtually, but that's not the same as connecting, like even this, connecting together. So I think all those things.
So what you're saying, because it's funny, because when people hear that, like the decline of church attendance and then the rise of depression and loneliness, and if you have someone on the outside looking in, they're like, well, that doesn't mean that church is the only way you can get social interaction. What would you say to someone like that? Because, it's true, right? Church is not the only place you go for social interaction. Actually, some Catholics would argue that the primary reason you go to church is for God first, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, one of the fruits of that is building a relationship with a community.
Right.
Even with our young adults, we're seeing that constantly, right? Everyone's so hyper-focused in on themselves that they don't have time to go and make friends. They don't have time to participate and build up a community. And really, it's almost like this, you're just back in the cycle, right? You don't have time because you're working on yourself, but because you're working on yourself, that you're not able to go out and do the actual thing that helps you grow and helps you feel connected. Mm-hmm. So what other things do you feel like that young adults now, you mentioned like phones, social media, can help really cause that disconnect?
So going back to the social media thing, right? I mean, it's interesting you just mentioned, right? They want to work on themselves. So, some people will go to social media to work on themselves, right? TikTok or whatever. But in some ways, I think in answer to that question, how do you work on yourself in the context of just being alone? Mm-hmm. I know more about myself being in a relationship with Diana because she'll tell me when I'm right, or you get into arguments because we just have disagreements. But that's how you learn about yourself. Uh-huh. It's hard to learn about yourself. I mean, you can do some introspection, some self-knowledge, reflection. Those are important. Those are helpful. But it's also in the context of being with other people that you learn about yourself. So that's one thing. Secondly, we'll do things that we prioritize. So when people say we don't have time, one of the things I'm thinking about if I'm in the office with a patient is, why don't you have time? You know, how much hours are you spending on Netflix watching a movie versus, hey, go out and or go, even going to the theater. Maybe it's a solitary thing, but you might meet people there. Or let's invite some folks to go there. Or even if there's shared interests, right? Book club, whatever. But find shared interests that you can and meet people.
Yeah.
In that context, I think there's ways to kind of build it all in.
Yeah,
if that makes
for
sense.
sure. No, yeah, definitely. And even just relating it back to church, right? Not only are you just going into a social environment as we worship God in a community, but all of that is grounded and centered in our faith.
Yes.
Right? It's all, we're looking upwards
Yes.
to something greater.
Yes.
And, there's hope, there's joy, and there's love, and there's peace, all that associated with it.